What up, my man in society? It is your host with the most, Shadow Loke, back at you with another video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. It's absolutely free. That is how you help my channel get into the algorithm. Highly appreciate if you go ahead and do that. Gotta tap on the subscribe, the like. It don't cost nothing. No, join the mat. Now, you get two today because I was asked a question by one of my subscribers, right? If I could do a video on depression and anxiety, right? That how come that wasn't a thing back then, right? Like in the 80s and stuff like that. And why is it now such a hot topic, or why is it a thing now, right? Like, why is it, front and center and something that people discuss and stuff like that? And simple, because of devices, our phones, people now literally have information in the palm of their hand and could, access, whatever they want to learn. Before, people, even though there was information, it wasn't, to the level that we have now, right? That with time, knowledge and information and knowing how things work, gets better, right? With time. But even though there was information back then, it was a lot more harder for people to get their hands on information, right? Even the internet wasn't how it is now, right? So even though there may have been information out there, it was a lot more difficult to track down, and and people just didn't have the means to track it down because it's not like we just all had phones and shit like that, right? So it was a lot more harder to actually educate yourself on topics like this. You know what I mean? So even though it did exist, it didn't exist to the level that now everybody, communicates with each other through social media, right? And is able to give their opinions and throw information out there and other people now to view it, right? Because of the devices and how, social media works and all of that, that people are now more aware of things than back then. They weren't aware. Right? Now, people will say that they think times are worse now, maybe because of that people know about this, right? Or use it as an excuse, because back then it was a lot better, right? It's not as chaotic as it is now, that we live in the worst time period now, which is not true. You know what I mean? The times we live in now, and even though stuff is bad, is nowhere near as bad as shit was before. You know what I mean? There's been times throughout history here in the United States, we're talking about, other events, right? That, shit, we had a civil war, my guys. You know what I mean? But the point is that there's been darker times than nowadays, right? Even with the pandemic, that's not the first pandemic. It's not even the one that killed the most people, bro. Not even close, There's been fucking pandemics, bro, that have killed almost entire ethnicities, my guy. You get what I'm saying? So people aren't, or forget about their history, right? Or maybe just don't know, certain things in history, right? But so these are not the darkest times and nowhere near the, but people say it was better, like even back in the days, like let's say the 80s, and a lot of people say that, what these kids lack is a good ass whooping, because, the lack of ass whooping or the lack of how can I say, like tough love, that these people, complain about everything and are so sensitive and use these as an excuse. Now, people say that works, right? The, coming at them hard and a good ass whooping, that worked. There's a reason why in the 80s and the 70s and the 90s, the crime rate was sky high, the murder rate was sky high, and, gang was at its full-time highest at that time frame. Isn't it kind of like strange that at that time frame, of these ass whoopings and tough love, that the crime rate, murder rate, and gang violence was at its highest peak? Gangs still exist now. Not as many there, but gang members exist now, but not as many as they used to be. You get what I mean? These gangs are not as large as they once were. Strange how things change. Now you could say that the law and stuff like that, but like I said, you still have individuals. The laws have gotten stricter, but you still have individuals out there being gangster and stuff like that. So it's not the law, because individuals are still joining, just at a smaller amount. What has changed? That the kids that were getting the ass whoopings are now the parents. So they're not doing no ass whooping. And if they are, not as much. And not as many. And maybe that explains why not that many individuals are out there running amok. because the crime rate, murder rate, and all that was higher in that time frame, the time that people think that was a better times than now. And that's because a lot of individuals, did have anxiety, depression, and all this and that, and just didn't know. So, nowadays, there's more therapy help, and people are more understanding and are aware of stuff, but back then they weren't. So people couldn't just like go and talk about their problems, right? So they went to the streets and unleashed their anger out there, because that's all fueled by anxiety, depression, and all of that. Because people just don't, even though people like to think that people just do things because, or he's acting like that because he wants to be like that, or he chose that because he just wants to. There's a reason for everything, bro. People just don't do stuff just because. There's a root to everything. And it's always the individuals that, are doing the problems and stuff like that, that they themselves say that, nah, there's no reason to it. I just do it just because I don't give a fuck. But then once you start seeing them get interviewed and broken down, you start to see the pattern. See, the reason why all these connections even started being found in the beginning, right, in the first place, right, to, before even psychology was a thing, right, it captured. Because before, like I said, technology wasn't what it is now, right? So people didn't have no knowledge of things that happen throughout the world, right? Nowadays, people record it, they upload it, people get to see what's happening in real time throughout the place. But back then, maybe a newspaper, if they covered it in the newspaper, some, lucky bastard, got the story and went over there and actually reported on it, right? Because even the news had difficult time, finding information. Now it's a lot more easier for them. But before, you had to get lucky. So knowledge was hard to come across, right? So it's not like people could just talk to somebody and pass the stories down. So, you have always had murders, mass shooters, prostitution, gambling, illegal activity throughout, the planet and throughout history. What caught these people's attention and they found fascinating is that, like, let's say, for example, you have serial killers, right? Like, you have serial killers in every country, right? And you have some that are even weird. They eat people, they sleep with dead bodies, and the worst of the worst, the wicked of the wicked, right? And that they found it fascinating that this individual, like, did this in, like, let's say, Japan, and then at the same roughly around the same time, you had a person doing the same thing in the United States, and then you had an individual just like that in China, and then another individual like that in Russia. And so it's strange because obviously, like I said, there was no communication before, before TV and all of that. So, it intrigued them that how is it that this individual acts like this individual on the other side of the planet? Like, what connection do they have? Like, there has to be a reason why they both turned out like this. You know what I mean? And then what's even more mind-baffling is that when they interview them and they start talking about their lives, that both individuals' lives matched up. But they don't know of each other, and they're all over across the world, and no communication with each other. So, like, so then they started investigating more and more people, right? And bad behaviors and behaviors in general, right? And they found a pattern, a matching link. When, like I said, it's not like it's a big conspiracy because, like I said, people didn't have no knowledge of each other or none of this stuff back then. Now, because of research, people are aware now, because the information is out there. But before, they didn't. So how is it that, people were becoming prostitutes, gangsters, murderers and all that throughout the planet, different ethnicities, different countries, but with no knowledge of each other? Because it's not like, the newspaper was just printing shit like that out, because even the news had no knowledge of stuff like this occurring in other countries. Now, they cover, throughout the planet, but before, and yet it was happening. People committing suicide, people that, you know what I mean? But it was happening throughout the world in different countries, and they know that there has to be a match and a pattern for it because, like I said, there's a root to everything, and then it's even more interesting to them once you interview them and you find out that they're similar in their background. You get what I'm saying? That's when they knew that there had to be something to human emotions, human feelings, and stuff like that. And why, they started now, the government's pumping money into this, into this new science field, right? A new science field to, get to the understanding and, a better of understanding humans and human behavior, you know? That was, with the evidence that they brought, the governments, bam, they also seen that, yeah, you're right. And they now started funding this new field in science. Because it wasn't just some stupid ideas that some guys who were too emotional wanted to create just to, slack. But because there was valid, information out there to the research that they're talking about. That, things are linked. And if you do behave in this manner, that most likely this is going to happen. Because it's been happening throughout history. Way before people were able to now, communicate and now just try to imitate or act like other people, and, this woke movement and, and all this crybabies. But before there was no social media and no communication of each other for people to get now these ideas in their heads. So why were they acting like this? Why were they depressed? Why were they committing suicide? Why were they doing and making these choices? And then to find out that people throughout the planet who have no knowledge of each other behave in the same similar manner. And then once you go into the background, it's the same fucking story. How is this? How is it possible? Because there's a connection. There's not just smoke and mirrors. It's facts. But people are so biased in their views, right? And how they view things. And because they don't want to believe science or believe the field or the research and everything like that, that they refuse to acknowledge, right, what's happening, and still stay stuck in their older mentalities and older ways and to their guns, and why the problem hasn't gotten fixed yet. Because obviously individuals aren't learning out there, right? But like I said, now with a better understanding, people now take a different approach to stuff. And why, now you have bad people out there, but not as many as you once did. Because people have a better understanding now of, how you treat a child. Because how you treat a child, what you tell a child, and all of that is going to make all the difference in the world of how that child turns out to be as an adult. You know what I mean? But people could go argue with the research. But this stuff has always existed, right? And yeah, and for this, I find it fascinating as well, right? Like, how is it that, why these people behave, and like I said, I could relate to a lot of it, right, as well, right? I have an understanding, and this is stuff, like I said, that they know information about you without you have never even told anybody anything, yet they know you was the trippy part, right? It was like, how the fuck did this person know this? When, you have never told nobody, so it's crazy in itself, right? Like, you're either psychic or maybe there's something to what you're saying. Because like I said, I could relate. But overall, that's just my breakdown. What are your thoughts? Leave it in the comments. Shout out, we up.